So you're a white guy, you're a judge, you're watching these cases after cases after cases. Tell us some stuff that goes on.
You know what's terrible is there's just so much I want to say because there's so much horror in this whole thing.
Hold up, right?
Yes, thank you. There's so much horror in this whole thing. I would sit on the bench and I presided over thousands, probably tens of thousands of cases, criminal cases. I did civil cases as well, but criminal cases. And I will tell you that I watched the people who stood before me, and I can tell you in Dayton, Ohio, population about 150,000, Montgomery County population about 650,000, a medium-sized place, rather, it's urban, but it's not a big city, but it's urban. There was a black side of town, there's a white side of town. And everybody I saw standing in front of me, almost everybody I saw, was poor. Almost everybody I saw standing in front of me came out of the city of Dayton. I didn't see people from the suburbs. I didn't see people from especially the rich suburbs like Oakwood and Centerville and all the white kids that were out there doing as much drugs, you saw it, as the black kids. I saw the poor kids in a town where half the kids were black. So I saw half the kids I was seeing were black. And I say kids because the statistic you used, 18 to 25, that covers about 80%, 75, 80% of who I would see. By the time people get past the age of 25, they do figure it out and try how to stay out of trouble. They're poor. They're highly disproportionately black. And what happens to them not only is the conviction they're probably going to get because they're standing in front of me, because they can't complain, like I just said earlier, they can't complain that, well, but you didn't go you didn't go arrest any white guys out there in the suburbs. Isn't this discriminatory for me to be standing in front of you? No. Did you do it or didn't you do it? That's the only question I can ask.
So that's the only one you can ask. So the issue is, so how do kids get in front of you? Like, how is it that a group of kids and not another group of kids?
Right. They only do drug enforcement primarily, and I shouldn't say only, because there are some exceptions to the rule. But primarily, and heavily primarily, they only do drug enforcement in the city. They only get the grants, the federal grants, the money that allows them to buy the equipment and do the kinds of surveillance and do the kinds of things they need to do and hire the cops that they need to hire. The only way they get all that money is that money goes to the urban areas. Suburbs don't worry about it. They don't apply for it. They don't have drug task forces. That's what they call them, the drug task force. We'd hear about the drug task force all the time. I got picked up by the drug task force. And that's what we would get. But it was all concentrated in the city and in the poor neighborhoods.
And disproportionately black and brown neighborhoods.
Disproportionately, highly disproportionately.
And who's making those decisions, man? Like, who's making the decisions in the end to say, these are the people we're going after? Or is it less that, and it's more just the suburbs are deciding, we're not going to treat our kids this way. We're not going to have a drug task force and so on.
Yeah, the suburbs either don't qualify for the money because the money's geared toward there's urban areas and there's certain populations, or they can't qualify for the money, or they don't qualify for the money because they don't see it as a problem. Now here is a real situation, a real problem that some folks in politics have run into, and I mean even black politicians who hear from their constituents in the city who are tired of their stuff getting stolen, who are tired of the gunfire in their neighborhoods, who are tired of being afraid to put their kids on the bus to school, and they demand a lot more enforcement.
So they're demanding the enforcement.
So they do demand the enforcement too.
Mm-hmm. So it's all coming from both ways.
So it comes both ways.
Say, tell the story. I remember, we haven't talked very much actually, but you did. I remember one time when I first met you, you told a story about the the kid on the bicycle that didn't have a light on it in the daytime, and like this kind of thing, and like what happens, how police can hassle people and their discretion about who they're going to arrest and not arrest, and that just was.
I'm a new judge. I'm a fairly new judge when this happened, and this kid, I get a kid in front of me. He got picked up for not having a light on his bicycle. Dayton has a law that you have to have a light on your bicycle. He got arrested for not having a light in his bicycle. Young black kid. It was in broad daylight. It was in the middle of the day. The police pulled him over, suspecting he might have some drugs, and he did have a small amount crack, very small amount. Crumbs. They pulled him over because they suspected something. It was just a hunch.
They suspected something, whatever.
They had no reason. They could articulate no other reason to pull him over, other than he did not have a light on his bicycle. And he's standing in front of me pleading guilty. And afterwards, I got his lawyer aside and I said, "I'm new, but why didn't you challenge that? Why didn't you file a motion to suppress on that? I mean, I don't know about that." He said, "Judge, you would have, even if you had ruled for me, they would have appealed it and you would have lost because, well, he violated the law. And if you violate the law, they have a right to pull you over, to stop you, frisk you, see what they can find."
So the police can just have that discretion to decide who they're going to go after.
Right. And I don't have the numbers in front of me to tell you, but you had that chart that went, Jeff, it's the one that went, how many blacks and whites, keep going, it was a black and white one. There you are. Was that it? Yes. Where you see the increase in black arrests around 2004, 2005. That's about when police began stop and frisk. When they began policies, and New York City was famous for this, when they began a policy of just, if they saw you, they'd stop you and they'd frisk you. They didn't have any probable cause or anything. It's actually illegal, and the courts have finally told them it's illegal. You can't do that. But they would do it. They would just stop and frisk you, and more than 85% of those who were stopped and frisked in New York City, they were black or people of color.
So here, we don't see any increase here.
But once you see stop and frisk.
But why aren't we seeing, we also don't see this increase in the white arrest
rate. Right, because they don't get stopped and frisked. In those kinds of numbers anyway. So you don't see it.
We're going to ask for some people in class to give some examples, but this is it, right? I know when I walk down the street, when I used to walk down the street with a bag of weed in my pocket, I never thought about getting stopped or anything, man. It was never an issue. It was not even in my consciousness that I could possibly get stopped.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you didn't have to worry about it in your neighborhood or where you went. One other thing, an observation I want to make too about Sam saying that this affects people personally, and he was talking in terms at first of the jobs and whether somebody could get a job. If you stood in front of me and you pled guilty to a crime, not only did it make it tougher for you to get a job, but you will, for the rest of your life in Ohio, and I'm going to tell you Ohio right now, and there's the same, it's true in Pennsylvania, but I don't know all the rules in Pennsylvania. But in Ohio, you were no longer going to be, you couldn't get a license to be a barber, to sell real estate, to sell insurance. You couldn't live in public housing. You couldn't get certain scholarships. There were over 500 different what they call collateral sanctions put on you because you pled guilty. 500 different things you can't do now for the rest of your life. So you're 18 years old, you're driving your bike down the road with the light out. The reason it matters for that kid is now he's got a criminal record, a felony criminal record, and for the rest of his life, he will struggle to get a job. He will struggle to get promotions if he's lucky enough to get a job. For the rest of his life, he's almost guaranteed to be living in poverty. almost guaranteed. There are people who overcome it, but it is rare. It is unusual. It is difficult to overcome that. Once you get that record, for life. For life. Every sentence I gave out, I may have given out a lot of probation and when I did, but it was still a life sentence. It was still a life sentence. This impacts people tremendously.
So when the police decide to use stop and frisk, and they're focusing on black and brown people and not white people, that's a whole population of people who are going to get, as you say, a life sentence.
A life sentence.
Just because of that decision on the part. And what